In the vast emptiness of space, a small alien ship raced toward Earth. Inside, a young alien girl named Lyra stared out the window, her green skin shimmering in the dim light. Her home planet, Orinthia, was known for its beautiful forests and bright skies. But now her ship was falling. Panic filled her heart as alarms blared loudly, shaking her tiny frame. "Prepare for crash landing," the ship's computer voice warned. Lyra had been on a mission to explore new worlds, but a sudden storm in space had sent her ship tumbling through the stars. She had tried to control it, but the controls were unresponsive. With tears in her eyes, she took a deep breath and closed her eyes as the ship plummeted toward an unknown planet. The crash was loud and violent. When the ship finally stopped, it was surrounded by smoke and twisted metal. Lyra slowly opened her eyes. She was shaken but alive. Coughing from the smoke, she pushed the door open. It creaked and groaned, but it opened just enough for her to slip out. She stepped onto the ground, feeling the warm soil beneath her feet. The air smelled different, filled with strange scents that tickled her nose. She looked around, her heart racing. Trees stood tall and green around her, unlike anything she had seen on Orinthia. In the distance, she saw a bright blue sky and heard the sound of rushing water. But Lyra felt frightened and alone. Lyra had read about Earth in her studies. It was filled with creatures called humans, but she had never imagined meeting one. She remembered her lessons about them. Some were kind and brave, while others could be dangerous. She needed to be careful. Lyra felt small and vulnerable. Her long, slender fingers trembled as she touched the ground. She knew she had to find help, but where could she go? Suddenly, she heard voices nearby. Fear gripped her heart. She ducked behind a large tree and peered out. A group of humans was approaching, their faces filled with concern and curiosity. "Look over there," one of the humans shouted, pointing toward the wreckage of her ship. Lyra's heart raced as she watched them. They were unlike any alien she had seen in the stars. They were tall, with strange clothing that covered them completely. Some had brown hair, while others had black or blonde hair. But what surprised her the most was their eyes. They sparkled with curiosity, not with fear. As the humans got closer, she took a step back, her heart pounding loudly in her chest. She wanted to scream, to run away, but her feet wouldn't move. She was frozen in place. The humans began to search the wreckage of her ship, calling out to each other. "Do you think anyone is inside?" one of them asked. "I don't know," replied another. "But we need to be careful. It could be dangerous." Lyra wanted to shout that she was there, that she needed help, but the words caught in her throat. What if they were not kind? What if they tried to hurt her? She hugged herself tightly, trembling with fear. Just then, one human separated from the group. His name was Jake. He stepped closer to the ship, peering inside. He was brave, and his eyes were filled with compassion. He glanced around, trying to see if anyone was inside. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. He was different from the others. She could sense his kindness. He looked young, maybe a few years older than she was. As he scanned the area, he suddenly paused. Their eyes met for a moment, and in that brief glance, Lyra felt a strange connection. Jake took a step toward the tree where she hid. "Hello," he called out gently. "Is anyone there? We can help you." Lyra felt a spark of hope. Could he really help her? She slowly stepped out from behind the tree, feeling the warmth of the sun on her skin. The other humans turned, their eyes widening in surprise. Jake gasped, taken aback by the sight of her. "An alien," he whispered in awe. Lyra stood frozen, unsure of what to do. She could see fear in the eyes of the other humans, but Jake did not seem afraid. He took another step forward, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "It's okay. We won't hurt you. We just want to help," he said softly. As she looked at him, Lyra felt her fear start to fade. His voice was calm, and his expression was warm. She slowly took a deep breath and stepped forward. "Help," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jake smiled gently. "See, you're safe here. My name is Jake. What's yours?" Lyra hesitated but felt a sense of trust growing. "Lyra," she said quietly, still feeling shy. "Welcome to Earth, Lyra," Jake said with a kind smile. Lyra's heart swelled with gratitude. She had been lost and afraid, but here was a human who wanted to help her. In that moment, she realized that perhaps she had found a friend in this strange new world. The other humans gathered around, their expressions shifting from fear to curiosity. Lyra stood tall, ready to embrace this new chapter of her life. She was no longer lost. She was here, and she was ready to discover what Earth had to offer. As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over the landscape, Lyra knew that her journey had only just begun. She looked at Jake, who smiled back at her, and for the first time since the crash, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, Earth could become her new homelies in a strange land. Lyra stood in the clearing, surrounded by the humans who had come to help her. Jake was at her side, a reassuring presence in this unfamiliar world. The other humans whispered to each other, their eyes filled with curiosity and concern. They were still trying to understand who or what she was, but Lyra felt a growing sense of comfort with Jake. "Where are you from?" one of the humans asked, stepping forward. She had curly brown hair and a gentle smile. "What happened to your ship?" I am from Orinthia," Lyra replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "My ship crashed. I need help." The humans exchanged glances, their expressions shifting from surprise to understanding. "We need to get her somewhere safe," Jake said, looking at the group. "She's scared and alone." "Let's take her to our camp," the girl suggested. "We can help her there. She might need medical attention." Lyra's heart raced at the idea of leaving the crash site. What if they were leading her into danger? But the look in Jake's eyes calmed her fears. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay." The group started walking, and Lyra followed closely behind Jake. The forest was filled with sounds she had never heard before. Birds chirping, leaves rustling in the wind, and the distant sound of water flowing. Everything felt vibrant and alive. As they walked, Jake turned to her. "Don't worry. You're safe with us. We're not like the aliens you might have met before." His smile was warm and genuine. "You can trust us." Lyra smiled back, feeling the tension in her body start to ease. She wanted to believe him. The more time she spent with Jake, the more she felt that he was telling the truth. After a short walk, they arrived at a clearing where several tents were set up. A fire crackled in the center, surrounded by logs for seating. Other humans were gathered there, cooking and chatting. When they saw Lyra, their eyes widened in surprise. "Who is she?" one of them asked, his voice filled with awe. "This is Lyra," Jake said proudly. "She's from another planet. Her ship crashed, and we're going to help her." The humans gathered around, curiosity shining in their eyes. "Can you tell us about your planet?" another girl asked eagerly. Lyra hesitated, feeling shy. She had always been taught to be cautious about sharing information. "Orinthia is beautiful," she began slowly. "We have tall trees, bright flowers, and blue rivers, but it is very different from Earth." The humans listened with fascination, leaning in closer. They asked her questions about her home, and Lyra felt more comfortable sharing her stories. It was nice to have someone interested in her life. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Jake moved closer to her. "Are you hungry?" he asked. "We have food. It's not like what you're used to, but it's good." Lyra's stomach grumbled at the mention of food. She nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. Jake led her to the fire, where the others were cooking. "We have fruits and vegetables," he said, picking up a piece of fruit that looked strange to her. "This is called an apple. You'll love it." Lyra took the fruit cautiously. It was bright red and shiny. She took a bite, and the sweet juice burst in her mouth. It was unlike anything she had ever tasted. "It's delicious," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up with surprise. The humans laughed, enjoying her reaction. They shared more food, and Lyra felt warmth spread in her chest. She had not only survived a crash, but found friends who cared about her. As night fell, they gathered around the fire, sharing stories and laughter. Jake introduced her to the other members of the group. Sarah, the girl with curly hair, and Mark, a tall boy with dark hair. They all treated her with kindness, making her feel welcome. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A rustling noise echoed from the trees surrounding the camp, causing everyone to stop. Lyra's heart raced as she sensed danger. The humans looked at each other, their expressions tense. "What was that?" Sarah whispered, clutching her arm. "It could be an animal," Jake said, trying to sound brave. "We should check it out." Lyra felt her heart pounding. She had heard stories of creatures lurking in the shadows, dangerous beasts that could strike at any moment. But as she looked around at the humans, she felt a wave of determination wash over her. She was not going to hide anymore. She had come here for a reason. "I can help," Lyra said, surprising herself. The humans turned to her, their eyes wide. "Are you sure?" Mark asked, uncertainty in his voice. "Yes," Lyra said, her voice firm. "I can sense things. I can help you understand what's out there." Jake nodded, his expression filled with trust. "Okay, let's work together." With that, they prepared themselves to face whatever was lurking in the darkness. Lyra took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the fire and the support of her new friends. In that moment, she understood that she was not alone. They were allies, ready to confront whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would face the unknown, and together, they would discover what Earth had in store for them. Shadows in the woods. The rustling in the trees grew louder, echoing like whispers in the night. Lyra stood beside Jake, her heart racing. The other humans were tense, their faces illuminated by the flickering firelight. She could feel their fear, but she also sensed something deeper, determination. "What do you sense?" Jake asked, glancing at her with concern. Lyra closed her eyes for a moment, focusing on the connection she had with her surroundings. "Something is out there," she said softly. "It feels strange, not quite right." Mark stepped forward, gripping a makeshift weapon, a thick branch he had picked up from the ground. "We need to be ready. It could be a predator," he said, trying to sound brave. The others nodded, tension hanging in the air. With a deep breath, Lyra opened her eyes and looked around. "Let's stick together. If we act as one, we can face whatever it is." Just then, a large shadow darted between the trees. The humans froze, their eyes wide with fear. Lyra's heart raced as she squinted into the darkness. Whatever it was, it moved quickly, its form difficult to make out. Suddenly, the creature burst into the clearing, a small furry animal with large eyes and long ears. It paused, looking curiously at the group. The tension melted away as everyone burst into laughter. "It's just a rabbit," Sarah exclaimed, her voice filled with relief. "Not quite what I expected," Jake chuckled, shaking his head. "But it's a good reminder that we can't always jump to conclusions." Lyra smiled, her heart lightening. "I guess we all have a tendency to fear what we don't know," she said. As the laughter died down, they returned to their fire, feeling a little more relaxed. The night deepened, stars twinkling overhead. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the night sky. "Let's talk about our plan," Jake said, his voice steady. "We need to find a way to contact your people, Lyra." Lyra nodded, her thoughts racing. "My ship has a communication system, but it was damaged in the crash. I might be able to repair it if we can gather the right materials." "What do you need?" Mark asked, eager to help. "I'll need some metal parts and tools," she replied, recalling the equipment she had seen on the ship. "If we can find a way to gather supplies, I can fix the communication device. Then that's our mission for tomorrow, Jake declared, his enthusiasm contagious. We'll help you gather everything you need. As they made plans for the next day, Lyra felt a warmth in her chest. For the first time since her crash, she felt hope. She was not just a survivor, she was part of a team. The group continued to share stories, talking late into the night. Lyra listened intently, learning more about her new friends. They shared tales of Earth's beauty, the challenges they faced, and the bonds they formed. Each story drew her closer to them, making her feel as if she belonged. When it was finally time for bed, they settled into their tents, and Lyra felt a mix of excitement and anxiety. She had never been in a place like this before, surrounded by humans who welcomed her so openly. She pulled her sleeping bag tightly around her and closed her eyes, her mind swirling with thoughts of home, hope, and the future. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the trees. Lyra awoke to the smell of cooking and laughter. She crawled out of her tent, stretching her arms above her head. The group was already up, busy preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Jake called, a big smile on his face. "We made pancakes. I hope you like them." Lyra's stomach rumbled in response. "I've never had pancakes before," she admitted, her eyes widening in surprise. "They're amazing," Sarah promised, handing her a plate piled high with golden pancakes. "You're going to love them." As Lyra took a bite, the sweetness danced on her tongue. "These are delicious," she exclaimed, her eyes lighting up. After breakfast, the group gathered around a map spread out on the ground. "All right, Lyra," Jake said, pointing at various locations. "Where do you think we can find the materials you need?" Lyra studied the map carefully. "There is an old junkyard nearby," she suggested, pointing to a spot not far from their camp. "I saw it from the air before I crashed. It might have the parts we need." "Let's go," Mark said excitedly. "We can take a few hours to check it out." The group set off, energized by the prospect of their adventure. As they walked, they chatted about their favorite places on Earth, sharing laughter and stories. Lyra felt her heart swell with joy. This journey was becoming more than just a quest for supplies. It was a chance to connect with others. When they reached the junkyard, they were greeted by towering piles of discarded machines, colorful bits of metal shining in the sunlight. The place smelled of rust and oil, and the air buzzed with excitement. "Look at all this," Sarah exclaimed, running ahead. "There's so much stuff here." "Be careful," Jake warned, moving cautiously between the stacks. "We don't want anything to fall on us." Lyra nodded, scanning the area for anything useful. "I need to find a control panel and some wiring," she said, her eyes darting around. As they searched, Lyra spotted an old spacecraft partially buried beneath some debris. It looked like it had been there for years, but it might hold exactly what she needed. "Over here," she called, hurrying toward it. The group gathered around, peering inside. "This could be perfect," Jake said, excitement sparkling in his eyes. Lyra crawled inside, her heart racing. "Yes, I see the control panel," she exclaimed. She quickly began to remove the panel, her hands working deftly. While she focused on the task, she could hear the humans talking excitedly outside. Their voices made her feel welcomed and safe. As she finally pulled the panel free, a wave of accomplishment washed over her. "I got it," she shouted, crawling out of the ship with the panel in her hands. "Awesome," Mark cheered, clapping her on the back. "You did it." "Now we just need wiring and a few tools," Lyra said, grinning. She felt a growing sense of hope as they continued their search. Together, they were gathering everything she needed to fix her communication device. As the day wore on, they filled their bags with parts and materials, laughter and teamwork guiding them. With each piece they found, Lyra felt more connected to her new friends, and she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to accomplish something great. As they made their way back to the camp, Lyra knew one thing for sure. She had found a new home among these humans, and together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. The heart of the machine. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the camp, Lyra felt a sense of urgency bubbling within her. She spread the gathered parts on the ground and began sorting through them. "We have everything we need to fix the communication device," she said, her voice filled with determination. Jake and the others gathered around, their faces lit by the fire. "What do we need to do?" he asked, leaning in closer. "First, I'll need to connect the wiring to the control panel," Lyra explained, her fingers brushing over the metal components. "Then, I'll have to find a power source to make it work." "Power source? Like a battery?" Sarah asked, curious. "Yes, exactly. But it needs to be strong enough to power the system," Lyra replied, glancing around the camp. "We'll have to check the junkyard again. There's bound to be something we can use." Mark nodded, his excitement bubbling over. "Let's go now. The sooner we start, the sooner we can call for help." With the sun almost set, Lyra knew they had to hurry. "We need to be careful, though. It's getting dark, and we don't know what else might be out here," she warned. Jake and the others nodded, and together, they'd made their way back to the junkyard. As they walked, the sounds of the forest surrounded them, crickets chirping, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. The stars began to twinkle above, adding a magical touch to their mission. Once they arrived, they split up to cover more ground. "Let's meet back here in 30 minutes, Jake said, determination in his voice. "Keep your eyes peeled for anything that might work." Lyra moved between the piles, her heart racing with hope. She spotted a few old vehicles and rummaged through them, searching for batteries. The darkness made it harder to see, but she could feel her way around, her hands brushing against cool metal and worn-out plastic. Suddenly, she heard a noise, a faint rustling behind her. She turned quickly, her heart pounding. "Is someone there?" she called out, her voice steady despite the flutter of fear in her chest. There was silence for a moment before a small creature darted out from behind a pile of junk. It was just another rabbit, but this one had bright blue eyes and a fluffy tail. Lyra couldn't help but smile, the tension easing away. "You scared me." She laughed softly, watching the rabbit hop away into the shadows. With renewed focus, she continued her search, digging through the debris. Just as she was about to give up, she spotted a large battery half buried in the dirt. "Yes," she exclaimed, pulling it out with both hands. It was heavy, but it looked intact. "I found it." She hurried back to the meeting point, adrenaline surging through her. Jake and the others were already there, holding various parts they had gathered. "Did you find anything?" Mark asked, his eyes wide with curiosity. "I found a battery," Lyra replied, showing it off with pride. "This should be enough to power the communication device." "Great job," Jake said, clapping her on the back. "Now let's head back to camp and get to work." The group made their way back, the night air cool against their skin. They arrived at the camp, the fire still crackling, and set the battery and parts on the ground. "All right, let's see what we can do," Lyra said, kneeling beside the pile of materials. The others gathered around, their faces eager with anticipation. She began connecting the wiring, carefully matching colors and ensuring everything was secure. "This might take a little time," she warned, focusing on her task, "but I believe we can get it working." The humans watched in awe as Lyra's hands moved swiftly, her experience evident in every motion. They talked quietly among themselves, sharing stories and laughter, their spirits high. After what felt like hours of work, Lyra finally stepped back, wiping her brow. "All right, it's ready for a test," she announced, her heart pounding with excitement and anxiety. "Let's hope it works." "Do you need help?" Sarah asked, looking concerned. "I'll need someone to help me power it on," Lyra said. "Mark, can you connect the battery?" Mark nodded eagerly, stepping forward. "I'm ready." As Mark carefully connected the battery, Lyra took a deep breath. On the count of 3, let's turn it on, she instructed. 1, 2, 3. Together, they flipped the switch and the device hummed to life. A blue light flickered on the control panel, illuminating their faces with a soft glow. It's working, Lyra shouted, a rush of relief washing over her. The others erupted in cheers, their voices filling the night. We did it, Jake exclaimed, clapping Lyra on the shoulder. You're amazing. Lyra's heart swelled with pride. We did it together, she said, looking around at her friends. Now let's see if we can make contact. She began typing on the control panel, trying to access the communication system. A series of beeps filled the air as she worked. Come on, please work, she whispered, her fingers flying over the keys. Moments later, a crackling noise echoed from the device. Hello? Is anyone there? A voice broke through the static. Lyra's heart raced as she recognized the voice. It's me, Lyra, she shouted, her voice filled with joy. I'm here. Lyra, are you all right? We've been searching for you. The voice replied, concern lacing through it. I'm safe. I'm with humans, and they're helping me. Lyra explained, her excitement bubbling over. We're trying to find a way to get back home. Just hold tight. We'll send help your way. The voice responded, relief evident. Lyra's heart soared. Thank you. Thank you so much. As the communication faded, she turned to the group, her eyes shining with happiness. They're sending help, she exclaimed, laughter spilling from her lips. We did it. The humans cheered, their joy echoing through the night. Lyra felt a warmth spreading through her, knowing she had found not only a way to reach her people, but also a new family among these brave humans. That night, they celebrated their success, sharing stories and laughter under the stars. Lyra knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. She had found hope, friendship, and a place where she truly belonged. The approach of darkness. The following day dawned with a fresh promise, the sun breaking through the clouds and casting a warm glow over the camp. Lyra woke up feeling a mix of excitement and anxiety. The communication device had worked, and help was on the way, but she still felt a weight of uncertainty. The aliens that had brought her here were still out there, searching for her. As she gathered around the fire with Jake, Sarah, and Mark for breakfast, the mood was light. What's the plan today? Sarah asked, her voice bright with enthusiasm. Lyra took a deep breath, glancing at the horizon. I think we should fortify our camp. We need to be prepared for anything, just in case the aliens come back, she replied. We can set up some defenses and scout the area for supplies. Jake nodded, a determined look in his eyes. Let's make this place a fortress, he declared, pumping his fist in the air. The group quickly divided their tasks. While Lyra, Jake, and Mark worked on strengthening the camp's perimeter, Sarah began gathering more supplies and food. They moved with purpose, each of them aware of the underlying tension. As the day progressed, they built barriers with fallen branches and rocks, making the entrance less visible from afar. Lyra showed them how to create traps from simple materials, teaching them to be vigilant against any potential threats. You need to think like an enemy, Lyra explained as they set up a tripwire near the edge of the camp. They won't just walk in, they'll be stealthy. We need to be one step ahead. Mark looked up at her, a mix of admiration and determination in his eyes. You've been through a lot, haven't you? He asked, his voice softening. Lyra nodded, her expression serious. I have, but I know we can protect ourselves if we stay smart and work together. Just as they finished setting up their defenses, a low rumble echoed through the air. The ground seemed to tremble beneath their feet. They exchanged worried glances. What was that? Sarah asked, her eyes wide. I don't know, Lyra replied, her heart racing. But we should check it out. It might be the aliens or something else. With tension in the air, they cautiously made their way toward the source of the noise. As they reached the edge of the camp, They spotted dark smoke rising in the distance. It billowed into the sky, thick and ominous. "Is that coming from the direction of the aliens' camp?" Jake asked, squinting against the sunlight. "I think it is," Lyra said, a sense of dread creeping in. "We need to move quickly. If they're in trouble, it could mean they're vulnerable." Group hurried towards the smoke, adrenaline pumping through their veins. As they approached, they spotted a clearing filled with wreckage. What looked like the remnants of an alien ship, parts of it were scattered across the ground, flames licking at the twisted metal. "What happened here?" Mark whispered, awe and fear mingling in his voice. "I don't know, but we should be careful," Lyra replied, scanning the area. "We can't let our guard down." They moved cautiously among the debris, their senses heightened. As they explored, they discovered strange alien technology scattered among the wreckage. Lyra bent down to examine a glowing device, its surface etched with unfamiliar symbols. "This is incredible," she said, her curiosity piqued. "We could learn so much from this." But just as she reached out to touch it, a loud screech pierced the air, sending chills down their spines. They froze, hearts pounding as the sound echoed through the clearing. "What was that?" Sarah gasped, eyes wide with fear. "Get behind me," Jake shouted, instinctively stepping in front of the others. Lyra's eyes darted around, searching for the source of the noise. From the shadows of the wreckage, a group of alien soldiers emerged, their armor glinting in the sunlight. They looked disoriented, their faces twisted with anger and confusion. Lyra felt a wave of panic wash over her. "We have to retreat," she urged, her voice urgent. "They don't look friendly." The group turned to run, but the aliens had spotted them. A piercing alarm blared from their devices, and they began to advance, weapons raised. "Move," Jake shouted, sprinting back toward the camp. The group followed closely, fear propelling them forward. They dashed through the trees, hearts racing as they ran for their lives. As they reached the camp, Lyra quickly glanced over her shoulder, seeing the aliens closing in. "We need to barricade the entrance," she yelled, adrenaline surging through her. They pushed the branches and rocks into place, their hands working frantically. The aliens were getting closer, their guttural voices echoing behind them. Lyra's mind raced as she fought to keep calm. "Get ready," she shouted, grabbing a makeshift weapon, a sharp piece of metal. "We'll defend ourselves if they get through." Just as they secured the entrance, the first alien crashed against the barricade, its heavy body slamming into the makeshift barrier. The others quickly joined, trying to force their way in. The humans stood together, fear flickering in their eyes, but determination hardening their resolve. "We can't let them take us," Lyra cried, raising her weapon high. In that moment, she felt the weight of her past and the hope of her future collide. She was no longer just a lost alien. She was part of this brave group of humans, ready to fight for their survival. Together, they would stand strong against the darkness that threatened to consume them. "You said, the battle for survival." The aliens pressed against the barricade, their voices a mix of anger and frustration. The ground trembled beneath their forceful attempts to break in. Lyra's heart raced as she felt the weight of the situation. She knew they had to act quickly. "Stay focused. We can't let them through," she shouted, rallying her friends. Jake, Sarah, and Mark stood firm, their faces a mix of fear and determination. They gripped their makeshift weapons, ready to defend their territory. The pounding at the barricade grew louder, and Lyra could hear the aliens shouting commands, their words unintelligible yet filled with urgency. "Get ready," Lyra yelled as the first alien managed to create a small gap in the barricade. The creature squeezed through, its sharp claws glinting in the dim light of the camp. With a surge of adrenaline, Jake swung his weapon at the alien, hitting it squarely in the side. The creature hissed in pain and staggered back. Lyra took this moment to dart forward, using her weapon to strike the alien's leg. It howled in rage, turning its attention toward her. "Keep fighting, G," She urged her friends as she ducked beneath the alien's grasping hand. The creature was larger and stronger than any of them, but they had the advantage of surprise and teamwork. Sarah stepped forward, swinging her weapon at the alien's head. She connected, sending it sprawling to the ground. "We can do this," she cried, her confidence growing. Mark rushed to help Lyra, blocking another alien's attack with a sturdy branch. "We need to push them back," he yelled, his voice steady despite the chaos. As more aliens began to pour into the camp, Lyra felt a surge of fear. They were outnumbered, and their makeshift defenses were crumbling. "We have to regroup," she shouted, trying to keep everyone focused. "Fall back to the trees." The group retreated into the thick woods surrounding their camp, using the trees as cover. The aliens followed, crashing through the underbrush. Lyra quickly assessed their situation. They needed a new plan. "Let's split up. We can ambush them from different angles," she suggested. "We can use the terrain to our advantage." Jake nodded, determination lighting his eyes. "I'll take the left side with Mark. Sarah, you and Lyra take the right." As they split up, Lyra felt a rush of adrenaline. This was their chance. They needed to work together and outsmart the aliens. She and Sarah crept through the underbrush, staying low and silent. "Do you think they'll follow us?" Sarah whispered, glancing back toward the direction of the camp. "They might, but we'll be ready," Lyra replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "Just remember to aim for their legs. We need to slow them down." They waited patiently, listening to the sounds of the battle as Jake and Mark engaged the aliens. Suddenly, Lyra caught sight of an alien emerging from the trees, its eyes scanning the area. It moved cautiously, unaware of their presence. "Now," Lyra hissed, springing into action. She lunged forward, swinging her weapon at the alien's legs. Sarah followed close behind, striking at the alien's torso. The creature stumbled, falling to the ground with a thud. "One down," Sarah exclaimed, a smile breaking across her face. But the victory was short-lived. More aliens appeared, drawn by the commotion. Lyra felt her stomach drop as she realized they were in danger of being surrounded. "We need to fall back," she shouted. Just as they turned to escape, an alien soldier lunged at them. Its claws swiped through the air, barely missing Lyra as she ducked. "Run," she yelled, adrenaline fueling her movements. They sprinted deeper into the forest, the sounds of the battle echoing behind them. Lyra's mind raced as she searched for a place to hide. She spotted a small cave nestled between the roots of a large tree. "Over there," she shouted, directing Sarah toward the opening. They dove inside, pressing their backs against the cool stone. The cave was dark, but they could hear the sounds of the battle outside, the clashing of metal, the growls of the aliens, and the shouts of Jake and Mark. "We can't stay here forever," Sarah whispered, her voice shaky. "What if they find us?" "They won't," Lyra said, trying to reassure her. "We just need to wait for the right moment." As they caught their breath, Lyra glanced around the cave. The walls were damp, and the air was thick with tension. She knew they had to come up with a plan, but her mind raced with fear and uncertainty. After a few minutes, the sounds outside began to quiet down. Lyra strained to listen, trying to make sense of what was happening. Had Jake and Mark managed to push the aliens back? "Do you think they're okay?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lyra took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain calm. "They will be. We need to trust them." Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the entrance of the cave, and Lyra's heart sank. The aliens had found them. "Get ready," she yelled, raising her weapon. As the cave entrance filled with shadows, Lyra's mind raced. They couldn't give up. They had fought too hard to survive. With renewed determination, she prepared to defend herself and Sarah, ready to face whatever came next. The battle for their survival was far from over, and they would not go down without a fight. The final stand. The darkness of the cave felt suffocating as the shadows loomed closer. Lyra and Sarah pressed against the cool stone walls, hearts pounding in unison. The echoing crash had been a clear warning. The aliens were right outside, and they would not stop until they found the humans. "Stay quiet," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. She could feel the tension in the air as the aliens moved closer, their guttural voices exchanging commands. She tightened her grip on her makeshift weapon, a sturdy branch sharpened to a point. Sarah's eyes were wide with fear, but Lyra could see the flicker of determination beneath the surface. They had fought hard, and they couldn't let fear defeat them now. Suddenly, the entrance to the cave filled with light, revealing the silhouettes of several alien soldiers. Lyra's heart raced as they peered inside, their alien eyes scanning the darkness. She held her breath, willing herself to remain unseen. The aliens stepped closer, their forms becoming clearer. Lyra could see their sharp claws and glimmering armor, and she felt a rush of adrenaline. They were formidable, but she had something they didn't: the will to fight for her life. "Now," she whispered urgently. Without waiting for another moment, Lyra charged forward, catching the first alien by surprise. She drove her sharpened branch into its side, and the creature let out a deafening roar before collapsing to the ground. "Lyra!" Sarah shouted, following her lead. She swung her own weapon at another alien, catching it off guard. The chaos erupted as the cave filled with shouts and sounds of struggle. They were fighting for their lives. More aliens rushed in, and Lyra felt the weight of their numbers pressing down on her. She and Sarah fought side by side, working in perfect sync. They dodged and weaved, striking with precision and determination. "Keep moving," Lyra yelled, pushing deeper into the cave. They couldn't let the aliens corner them. She could hear the footsteps of their friends outside, but she couldn't risk turning back until they had cleared the entrance. As they fought their way through the horde, Lyra spotted a faint glimmer of light at the back of the cave. "Over there. Let's get to that exit," she shouted, pointing toward the light. It was a small opening, barely wide enough for them to squeeze through. "On it," Sarah replied, and they made a dash for the exit, battling through the aliens in their path. Lyra could feel the heat of battle surrounding them, and she pushed forward with every ounce of strength she had left. Finally, they reached the opening. Just as they were about to escape, an alien soldier lunged at them, its claws swiping through the air. Lyra ducked just in time, and Sarah delivered a swift blow to the creature's head, sending it sprawling backward. "Go, go," Lyra urged, shoving Sarah through the opening before following closely behind. They tumbled out into the open air, gasping as they found themselves in a clearing surrounded by tall trees. "Where are Jake and Mark?" Sarah panted, looking around frantically. "I don't know," Lyra replied, her heart racing. They needed to regroup. The battle was still raging around them, and the sounds of conflict filled the air. Just then, they heard a familiar shout. "Lyra! Sarah!" It was Jake, emerging from the trees with Mark at his side. They were battered but alive, determination etched on their faces. "We need to hold them off," Jake shouted, pointing toward the direction of the advancing aliens. "They're coming." Lyra nodded, feeling a surge of hope. "Let's make a stand together." The four of them formed a line, weapons ready, as the aliens burst into the clearing. Lyra felt a mix of fear and adrenaline, but she pushed it aside. They had each other, and they were ready to fight. As the first alien charged, they moved as one, attacking with precision. Lyra struck first, aiming for the alien's legs. Jake and Mark followed suit, each blow fueled by their determination to protect one another. The aliens were relentless, but so were the humans. They fought back fiercely, their teamwork becoming a force the aliens had not anticipated. Lyra felt empowered, each strike a testament to their resilience. "Keep pushing," Mark yelled, driving his weapon into the side of another alien. "We can't let them take our home." They fought with everything they had, refusing to back down. The clearing became a battleground, filled with sounds of clash and chaos. Despite the overwhelming odds, Lyra felt a flicker of hope in her heart. But the aliens kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Just as fatigue began to set in, Lyra spotted something in the distance. A small group of humans, armed and ready, was making its way toward them. They were reinforcements. "Look," she shouted, pointing. "We're not alone." The newcomers joined the fray, creating a wall of human strength. With their combined forces, they began to push back against the aliens, reclaiming their territory 1 inch at a time. As the battle raged on, Lyra felt a sense of unity and determination envelop the group. They were fighting not just for their survival, but for their home and each other. They would not be defeated. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tide began to turn. The aliens, realizing they were outnumbered and outmatched, started to retreat. A sense of victory washed over Lyra as the humans pressed forward, driving the invaders back. With one final push, the last of the aliens flowed into the forest, leaving the clearing silent except for the heavy breathing of the humans. They had won, but at a cost. Many were wounded, and the scars of battle would remain. As Lyra looked around at her friends, she felt a rush of gratitude and pride. They had faced the impossible and emerged stronger. Together, they had fought back against the fearsome aliens who had underestimated the strength of humanity. In that moment, Lyra knew this was only the beginning. They would rebuild, recover, and prepare for whatever challenges lay ahead. Earth was their home, and they would protect it fiercely. With renewed hope, they stood together, united and ready to face whatever came next. They were humans, and they would not back down.